I'm 28 years old and I work as a hospice nurse. That's the job where you take care of people who have maybe a few months left. Sometimes a few weeks. Sometimes just hours. People always ask me how I handle the weight of it, watching people die, day after day. The truth is, it's not the dying that gets to me. It's the living. Because at least my patients don't lie to me. They don't have the energy or the time for pretense anymore. My family, though? They have all the time in the world for pretense. They're the best actors I've ever known. I should probably start with the family photos. Not just one, all of them. Every Easter, every Thanksgiving, every Christmas, like clockwork. My mother Linda would announce the dress code 3 days in advance through the group chat. My father Frank would set up the tripod. My sister Megan would call out "cheese" in that bright, practiced voice that made everyone's faces stretch into identical smiles. And me? I set the table. Don't get me wrong. Someone always called me over. Linda would wave her hand and say, "Ella, stop fussing with the plates and get in here." But by the time I wiped my hands and walked over, she'd already started the countdown. 1, 2, 3. Frank would click the shutter. And I'd be somewhere at the very edge of the frame, sometimes half my body cropped out, sometimes just an arm reaching in from the side like an afterthought. "Stand in the middle next time," Linda would say. But there was always a next time. And I was always on the edge. We lived in a small town called White Bear Lake, Minnesota. Winters there were brutal, the kind of cold that freezes your nostrils shut the second you step outside. Our house was a white colonial with a big oak tree in the front yard, the kind of house that screamed solid, respectable, middle-class American family. Frank liked to say it had been in the Mitchell family for 4 generations. The implication was always the same: we were all branches on that tree. But I always felt more like a mushroom growing at the base of the roots. Technically part of the ecosystem, but nobody really looked at you twice. Megan was 4 years older than me. Blonde, blue-eyed, head cheerleader in high school. She'd married a real estate attorney named Jack and lived in the fancy part of town with their 2 boys. She had something like 20,000 followers on Instagram, where she posted pictures of her baking, her garden, her kids in matching outfits, always with some caption like, "Grateful for every moment." And me? 28, single, renting a basement apartment, and spending my days with people who were actively dying. When Linda talked about my job, she used this careful tone: "Ella does, well, meaningful work. You know, with the elderly." Then she'd pivot, almost relieved, and ask Megan how much their new hardwood floors had cost. I was used to it. Really, I was. The same way you get used to always standing at the edge of the frame. The shift came at Easter. It was the first weekend of April. The snow had just melted, leaving behind a muddy, gray landscape. I'd just finished a 36-hour shift and had collapsed into bed. When I finally surfaced, my phone was exploding with notifications from the family group chat. "Ella, what time are you coming for Easter? Ella, you're bringing the mashed potatoes, remember? No garlic, Jack's allergic. Ella, when you get here, can you set up the chairs in the backyard? We're expecting about 20 people." I checked the time, 2 p.m. Dinner was at 5:30. I dragged myself out of bed, splashed water on my face, drove to the grocery store for potatoes, butter, and milk, and spent an hour making the biggest batch of mashed potatoes I'd ever attempted. Then I changed into the spring pastels outfit Linda had specified and drove to my parents' house. Megan and Jack were already there. Jack was in the living room with Frank, drinking whiskey and talking about investments. Megan was in the kitchen helping Linda plate things. The two boys, Liam, 6, and Noah, 4, were chasing the dog around the backyard, leaving muddy footprints everywhere. "Ella's here," Linda called out without turning around. "Put the mashed potatoes on the dining table, use that glass bowl with the lid. And then grab the chair cushions from the garage, would you?" I did as I was told. By the time I'd arranged the 20 folding chairs in neat rows in the backyard, the living room was packed. My aunt and uncle, 2 cousins, a cousin's husband, their kid, somewhere around 20 people crammed into that space, noise bouncing off the walls like a party I'd never quite been invited to. I found a corner and sank into a single armchair. "Ella," Megan's head appeared from the kitchen doorway. "Can you keep an eye on the kids? Make sure they don't fall into the pond." I went. By the time I'd retrieved 2 soaking wet, mud-caked boys and marched them back to their mother, Linda was already herding everyone outside for the group photo. "Hurry, hurry, the light's fading." Linda's voice cut through the chatter. "Megan, you stand in the center with Noah. Jack, next to her. Liam, in front. Frank, is the tripod ready?" Frank was fiddling with his camera. "Almost. Everyone gather up, aunt and uncle in the back row." I was pushed to the far left. Literally. I ended up standing beside the big oak tree, half my body blocked by the trunk. 3, 2, Frank started. "Wait." Megan interrupted. "Liam has mud on his face. Mom, do you have a wet wipe?" More chaos. More shuffling. Finally, everyone was back in position. 3, 2. "Noah, hold still. Look at the camera." Jack grabbed his younger son. All right, just take it already," Linda waved. Click. I saw the photo later that night, on Megan's Instagram feed. The caption read, "Easter with the Mitchell family. Grateful for every moment together." 20 people, perfectly arranged. Megan and Jack front and center, their boys beaming. Linda in her best floral dress, Frank's arm draped protectively over her shoulder. And me? In the far left corner, visible only as a sliver of pale green sweater. My sleeve. Nothing else. Not even half my face. That wasn't even the worst part. The worst part was scrolling through the group chat afterward and realizing no one had mentioned it. No one said, "Wait, where's Ella?" Linda had reposted Megan's photo with a cheerful, "So beautiful." Frank had liked it. My cousin had commented, "Megan, you look gorgeous today." I stared at that green sliver for a long time. Then I put my phone face down on the bed. Just let it go, I told myself. You don't like having your picture taken anyway. But apparently, someone else cared. It was past 11 that night. I'd just finished my shower and was about to go to sleep when my phone buzzed with a notification, a comment on Megan's Easter post. Someone had tagged me. I clicked on it. The account was a generic gray avatar, a string of random letters and numbers. A burner account, probably. The comment was only one sentence. At Ella Mitchell, have you ever wondered why you're the only Mitchell without a family middle name? I froze. Family middle names were a Mitchell tradition, a point of pride, really. Frank Mitchell was Frank William Mitchell. Linda was Linda Marie Mitchell. Megan was Megan Elizabeth Mitchell. Even the boys had them, Liam Thomas, Noah James. And me? Ella Mitchell. No middle name. All my life, every form I'd ever filled out, first name, Ella, last name, Mitchell. Middle name, blank. When I was little, I'd asked Linda about it once. She'd shrugged and said, We just couldn't decide on one. Then she'd changed the subject. After a while, I stopped asking. The comment burrowed into my brain like a needle I'd always known was there but had learned to ignore. I stared at it for 2 full minutes. Then I refreshed the page. The post was gone. Megan had deleted it. Or hidden it. Within 60 seconds of that comment appearing, I clicked on the gray avatar again. User not found. The account was already gone. My heart was beating faster now. It was that strange feeling, like a door you'd always assumed was locked suddenly swinging open, just a crack. I was about to text Linda when another message popped up on my phone. A text from an unknown number. No name. Just 2 lines. Ella, I'm Catherine O'Brien. I was a nurse at St. Mary's for 35 years. I was on the night shift when you were born. Your real name is Ella Rose Mitchell. Rose was your grandmother's name. But after you were born, someone changed your birth certificate. Rose. My grandmother's name. I'd never met her. Linda always said she'd died before I was born. My thumbs were hovering over the keyboard when another message came through. Wednesday at 3 p.m. White Bear Lake Public Library, 2nd floor, by the window. I'll be waiting. Don't tell your family. My fingers went cold. From the other side of the wall, I could hear Linda's voice, muffled but insistent. Frank, did you see that comment? Who would do something like that? Frank mumbled something I couldn't catch. I turned off my screen and lay back against my pillows, staring at the ceiling. That night, I dreamed I was standing under the big oak tree again. Everyone else was in the photo, laughing and smiling. I tried to step forward, but roots had grown up around my feet, wrapping around my ankles, holding me in place. I woke up with a wet spot on my pillow. I didn't know if it was sweat or tears. The next day, I went to work like nothing had happened. St. Mary's Hospice Wing was a squat beige building on the other side of town, surrounded by scraggly evergreens. We had 8 nurses on rotation, covering 12 beds. Most of our patients had terminal cancer or end-stage organ failure. The average stay was about 6 weeks. Some people find that kind of place depressing. I'd always found it oddly peaceful. There was a quiet honesty to it. Everyone knew exactly where they stood, so no one wasted energy on pretense. But that day, I couldn't focus. I nearly missed a vein while changing in 4 for one of my patients, an 82-year-old woman named Betty with lung cancer, sharp as a tack and twice as observant. She grabbed my wrist with surprising strength. "You're off today, kid." "I'm fine, Betty," I said, forcing a smile. "Just didn't sleep well. Your face is a story that's not being told." She patted my hand. "Go. I'll rest." I stepped out of the room and leaned against the hallway wall, closing my eyes. Catherine O'Brien. The name was familiar. I'd seen it in the old hospital archives, St. Mary's staff rosters from the 1960s through the 90s. She'd worked in obstetrics. She was on duty the night I was born. She said someone changed my birth certificate. But why? During my lunch break, I sat in the break room eating a turkey sandwich and scrolling through my phone, searching for anything about the name, Rose. Linda had never talked about my grandmother. All I knew was that she'd been a Ross before she married a Mitchell, and she'd died young. How? From what? No one had ever told me. It was like my grandmother had been erased from family history. At 3 p.m., I clocked out, changed clothes, and drove to the library. The White Bear Lake Public Library was one of the oldest buildings in town, red brick, arched windows, A brass plaque on the wall reading, "Established 1912." It was always quiet, especially on weekdays. The second-floor window seats were almost never occupied. But today, one of them was. I spotted her the moment I walked in. An elderly woman with silver hair, wearing a navy wool coat, a cup of tea gone cold in front of her. She was broad-shouldered but thin, with high cheekbones and the kind of sharp, assessing gaze that only comes from a lifetime in nursing, calm, careful, missing nothing. I walked over and sat down across from her. "Catherine." She nodded. For a long moment she just looked at me, her eyes tracing my face. Then she said, "You look like your grandmother." My throat tightened. "You knew her?" 20 years. Catherine pushed the teacup aside and folded her hands on the table. "She was my friend. Also a nurse at St. Mary's." I gripped the strap of my bag, knuckles white. "Did your mother, Linda, ever talk about her?" Catherine asked. It wasn't really a question. "Not much," I admitted. "I just know she was a Ross before she married. And that she died before I was born." "Yes," Catherine said quietly. "She died. In 1988, 7 days after you were born. Postpartum hemorrhage. They couldn't save her." I blinked, my brain stumbling over itself. My grandmother died after I was born? But that would mean my mother gave birth to me while she was grieving her own mother, except... Wait. I held up a hand. Hold on. You're saying my mother, Linda, lost her mom right after I was born? But Linda's mom would have been, I was born in 1996, not. Catherine was looking at me with an expression I couldn't quite read. Something close to pity, but not quite. There was something else underneath it. Something heavier. "Ella," she said. "Eleanor Ross wasn't Linda's mother." I stopped breathing. "What?" "The postpartum hemorrhage I'm talking about," Catherine said, each word deliberately measured, "was from your mother giving birth to you. On July 13, 1988, a young woman delivered a baby girl at St. Mary's. She hemorrhaged afterward and was pronounced dead. That woman was your biological mother. Her name was Margaret Ross." The world tilted. In the background, I could hear the rustle of someone turning a page. Birds chirping outside the window. All of it sounded like it was coming from behind a wall of glass. "Margaret Ross," I repeated, my voice not sounding like my own. "Your grandmother's only daughter," Catherine said. Her voice was steady, practiced, the voice of someone who'd delivered hard news to families for decades. "I was in the delivery room that night. I cleaned you up, wrapped you in a blanket, and handed you to your adoptive mother." Adoptive. Linda Mitchell. "Linda was a college roommate of my sister's," Catherine continued. "She'd just had a miscarriage, and the doctors told her she'd probably never carry another baby to term. Your biological mother, Margaret, was unmarried. No one knew who the father was. She died. Your grandmother, Eleanor, was beside herself. She held you and cried for an entire day and night." "And then what?" My voice was barely above a whisper. "And then Linda and Frank came to the hospital. They'd heard about it through my sister. Linda talked to Eleanor for hours, told her she and Frank wanted to raise you, that they'd give you a good home, a real family. Eleanor was broken. She'd just lost her only daughter. She was empty." She agreed. Catherine paused. "But there was a condition." "What condition?" "She wanted you to keep the name Ross. That was her bloodline, her family name. She took Linda's hands and said, 'This child has to be Margaret Rose, at least her middle name has to be Rose. That's my only condition. My eyes were burning. Linda agreed, Catherine said. Right there, she signed the adoption papers in front of Eleanor. The original birth certificate was filed with the name Ella Rose Mitchell. Then why? Because Linda changed it 2 days later. Catherine's voice, for the first time, held an edge of restrained anger. She went back to the registrar's office and said there'd been a mistake, that the middle name was never meant to be there. The clerk was an intern. She just let her change it. By the time I found out, months had passed. I stared at the grain of the wooden table, my vision blurry. So the woman I'd always called Mom, Linda, wasn't my biological mother. My real mother was Margaret Ross, a 22-year-old who died giving birth to me. My grandmother had handed me over to the Mitchells on one condition, that I keep Rose as my middle name. Linda had nodded and smiled and promised. Then she'd erased it. I'd gone my whole life thinking I was a Mitchell. A fourth-generation Mitchell, part of a lineage that went back decades in White Bear Lake. But I wasn't even that. I wasn't anything they'd ever claimed me to be. Eleanor found out later, Catherine said. She was livid. But by then she didn't have the strength to fight. She was already sick, cancer. She couldn't sustain it. She died in 1990. The last thing she ever said to me on the phone was, Catherine, the worst mistake I ever made was giving that child to her. A tear hit the table. Then another. Catherine reached out and took my hand. Her palm was rough, calloused from decades of work, but it was warm. I wanted to find you sooner, she said. But I didn't know what kind of life Linda had given you. I waited. I kept waiting for the right time. And then I realized, there's no such thing as a right time. There's only the truth. And you deserved it. Then why now? I managed. After all these years? Catherine was quiet for a moment. Because I saw your life, Ella. I followed your social media. The photographs, you were always on the edge. Always half-cropped. Linda only ever posted Megan and the boys. Where were you? The corner. Always. It looked to me like you were a stranger in your own family. I closed my eyes. Also. Catherine reached into her bag and pulled out a yellowed envelope. Your grandmother left this for you. She gave it to me before she died, said to give it to you when you came of age. I held on to it for 30 years, not knowing if I was doing the right thing. Today I decided, it's time. The envelope was old, the edges softened, the handwriting on the front feminine and careful, for my granddaughter, Ella Rose, so you know who you are. My fingers trembled as I opened it. Inside was a folded letter and an old key on a rusted ring. The letter was yellowed, the ink faded but legible. Ella. I am your grandmother, Eleanor Ross. If you're reading this, I'm gone, and you finally know the truth. Your mother Margaret was my only daughter. She was beautiful, kind, and brave. She was only 22 when she died. You were the only gift she left in this world. Letting the Mitchells take you was the most painful decision I ever made. Linda promised to name you Ella Rose Mitchell. She lied. She lied to an old, dying woman. I don't blame you, child, you didn't know. The key attached is to the house at 17 Old Mill Lane. That's my mother's house, the Ross family home. The deed is with my attorney, Frank Morrison. Go to him. The house is yours. I will always be watching. My granddaughter, Ella Rose. Grandmother Eleanor Ross. March 12, 1990 inch. I pressed the letter against my chest and sobbed, ugly, heaving, gasping sobs that echoed in the quiet library. Catherine held my hand the entire time, saying nothing. When I finally came up for air, my voice was wrecked. "Catherine, do you know who my father was?" She shook her head. Margaret never said. When I asked during one of her prenatal visits, she just said, "He's not worth mentioning." I nodded. After another long pause, I asked, "And Linda and Frank, they know you know all of this?" Catherine's mouth tightened into a thin smile. "They knew. Eleanor called me with them in the room. Linda came to see me afterward and told me to stay out of it. That was 30 years ago. I think they assumed I was dead by now." She met my eyes, her gaze intense. "Ella, what do you want to do?" I looked down at the key in my palm, its jagged edge digging into my skin. "I don't know," I said. My voice was still raw, but it wasn't shaking anymore. "But I know the truth now. They lied to me for 28 years. Catherine nodded. "Whatever you need. I'm here." I walked out of the library just as the sun was dipping below the rooflines. April evening, cold, damp, with that particular chill that settles off the lake. I stood at the top of the library steps and stared across the street at the old oak tree on the corner, its new leaves shivering in the wind. My phone buzzed. Linda. The screen read, "Mom." I watched it ring 6 times. I didn't answer. A text came through, "Ella, you looked so blurry in the Easter photo. You were standing too far to the side. Stand in the middle next time." I laughed. There was no warmth in it. I deleted the message. Then I opened my phone's notes app and typed. "Find Frank Morrison, attorney. Verify deed to 17 Old Mill Lane." I looked up at the lights flickering on across White Bear Lake, one by one, in the dusk. Somewhere out there, one of those lights actually belonged to me. But I didn't go to the attorney right away. Catherine had given me a lot to process. For the next 3 days, I moved through the motions, work, shifts, changing IVs, charting vitals. On the outside, I was the same quiet, reliable Ella. Inside, my head was a knot of everything I'd learned. Linda and Frank weren't my parents. They'd adopted me, then stripped away my middle name, hidden my inheritance, built their whole family narrative on a lie. I'd always thought of myself as the Mitchell family's marginal member. Now I knew I wasn't even a Mitchell at all. I was a Ross. On the 4th day, I took a personal day and drove to Frank Morrison's law office. It was a small, old-fashioned practice above a shop in the town center, the windows dusty with spider plants that looked like they hadn't been watered in weeks. The receptionist paged through her files when I asked for Eleanor Ross's property documents, then had me wait. Frank Morrison was in his 70s, bald, with gold-rimmed glasses and the weary look of a man who'd been counting down to retirement for years. He closed his office door with a quiet click, almost secretive. "You came," he said. It wasn't a question. "Did you know I would?" Catherine called. He gestured for me to sit, then unlocked a drawer and pulled out a thick manila folder. "She waited 30 years. I waited just as long." He slid the folder across the desk. Inside was a deed, a copy of a will, and another letter in Eleanor's handwriting, the original, dated December 1989. Eleanor had everything notarized that year, Morrison said. She left the house at 17 Old Mill Lane and a trust fund of approximately $110,000 to you, Ella Rose Mitchell. The will specified you were to inherit once you turned 21. But I never knew any of this. Because the documents stayed with me. He adjusted his glasses. Your adoptive parents didn't know. Or rather, they thought I'd already destroyed them. Eleanor specifically instructed me to keep it from Linda and Frank. She didn't trust them. I ran my finger over the old deed, tracing the address, 17 Old Mill Lane, White Bear Lake. I knew the area, east side of town, near the lake, an older neighborhood of small houses and big trees. I'd driven past it a few times but never stopped. What condition is the house in? I asked. Empty for over 30 years. Morrison said. But the property taxes have been paid every year. I used Eleanor's trust to cover them. What's left is about $97,000 after all those years of taxes. I closed my eyes. $97,000. A house. An inheritance I'd never known existed. And Linda and Frank, in 28 years, had never once mentioned a word of it. What do I need to do to formally take possession? Morrison slid a stack of forms toward me. Sign these. Bring your ID. The house is yours. The will is on file with the county, there's no room for dispute. I picked up his pen, my hand steadying. I signed the documents with a signature that felt heavier than usual, Ella Rose Mitchell. I wrote it deliberately, spacing out the letters. One more thing, Morrison said. The house has been empty a long time. Utilities have probably been shut off. You'll want to get a contractor in to assess what needs fixing. This is the key. He handed me an old brass key. I took it, identical to the one Catherine had given me. I drove directly to Old Mill Lane. 17 Old Mill Lane sat at the end of a quiet street lined with ancient elms, their spring leaves casting dappled shadows across the pavement. The house was a small yellow two-story with a little attic window and a white picket fence that had tilted slightly with age. But the bones were solid. I stood outside the fence and just looked at it. This was the Ross family home. This was where my grandmother had lived. Where my birth mother, Margaret, had grown up. I fit the key into the front lock. It was stiff with rust, and I had to wrestle it, but eventually the mechanism gave with a gritty shudder. I pushed the door open. The smell hit me first, old wood, dust, a faint trace of something floral long faded. The living room was draped in white sheets, ghost-like shapes of furniture beneath. A faded landscape hung on the wall. Sunlight slanted through grimy windows, illuminating motes of dust that swirled in slow motion. I walked through the room slowly. The kitchen cupboard still held plates. In the bedroom, an old Bible sat on the nightstand, its pages soft with age. Wedged between the pages was a black and white photograph, a young woman cradling a baby, smiling like the sun had just come out. On the back, in pencil, Margaret and Ella, July 1988. My birth mother. Holding me. I sank to the floor, clutching the photograph, the old Bible sliding off my lap. I didn't cry, I'd done enough of that. I just sat there, in the middle of the empty bedroom, staring at the sunlight filtering through the window, at the elm tree swaying outside. And in that silence, something clicked into place. I was going to take back everything that was mine. I locked up the house and drove back to my rental apartment. On the way, my phone rang. Megan. Ella, Mom said you haven't been responding since Easter. What's going on? Nothing, just busy, I said. Busy with what? Your job's always the same rotation. Her voice was breezy, unconcerned. Oh, by the way, there's a small get-together at Mom and Dad's this weekend. Jack's brother Andrew is visiting from Chicago. Mom thought you should meet him. He's single, works in finance. I almost laughed. They'd never bothered to set me up before. Now they were suddenly interested in my social life? Translation: Linda was worried I was slipping out of her orbit and wanted to reel me back into the frame. Saturday afternoon? I asked. 4:30. I'll be there. I hung up and opened my laptop. I started digging into property records. The Mitchell house, my childhood home, had been in the family for generations. But when I traced the original purchase, I found something interesting. The down payment for the house on Maple Avenue, the one the Mitchells had lived in for almost 5 decades, had come from a private loan. A $50,000 loan. From Eleanor Ross. Dated 1978, the year Linda and Frank got married. The loan wasn't notarized, but there was a handwritten IOU in the file Morrison had given me. Frank Mitchell had borrowed $50,000 from Eleanor Ross to purchase the house at 42 Maple Avenue. Terms: to be repaid within 5 years. They never paid it back. I stared at the scanned document on my screen. They'd bought their house with my grandmother's money. They'd raised me in a house I had a stake in, and they'd never told me. They'd erased my name, hidden my inheritance, and lived for 30 years in a home I'd helped pay for without even knowing it. I opened my notes app and started a list. Asterisk things to do asterisk. 1. Formally claim ownership of 17 Old Mill Lane. Friday, at the county office. 2. Hire contractor to assess repairs. 3. Verify legal status of the $50,000 loan. 4. Compile every scrap of evidence regarding my adoption and the name change. 5. Saturday family dinner, bring a recording device. Recording device. I ordered a small digital recorder online, $30, small enough to fit inside my bra strap. It would arrive in 2 days. By the time I closed my laptop, it was nearly 1 a.m. I lay in bed staring at the ceiling, trying to remember a single moment in my childhood when Linda had looked at me like I was hers. The only memory that surfaced was from when I was 5. She'd taught me how to hold a spoon, her hand over mine, patient and careful. "Ella," she'd said, "you need to learn to feed yourself." I never could figure out why that memory stuck. Now I wondered if it was because, even back then, I was already an outsider being trained to fend for myself. Saturday afternoon, I put on the same pale green sweater I'd worn on Easter, the one that had ended up as just a sliver of fabric in the photo. I clipped the recorder to the inside of my bra strap, tested it once, and drove to 42 Maple Avenue. Megan and Jack were already there, along with Jack's brother Andrew, a heavy-set guy with expensive taste in watches and a salesman's smile. Linda practically bounded toward me when I walked in. "Ella. There you are. Andrew was just telling us about his company going public." She steered me toward Andrew, her hand firm on my elbow. "You two should talk." Andrew gave me a nod. "Megan said you're a nurse?" "Which hospital?" "St. Mary's Hospice." His smile flickered for just a moment before recovering. "Oh. Ah, meaningful work." I smiled back and said nothing. Over dinner, Linda did her usual song and dance. Praised Megan for her promotion at the insurance company. Gushed about the boys. Mentioned Jack's latest real estate deal. Occasionally, she'd throw a line my way, "Ella's been busy too, right?" "Fine," I said. "By the way, I drove out to Old Mill Lane earlier this week." The table went quiet. Linda's smile froze at the edges. "Old Mill Lane? What's out there?" "Just exploring. There's this old yellow house that's been empty for ages. Cute place." Frank's fork paused midair, suspended over his plate. "That house?" Frank cleared his throat. "I think that's an old property. Been abandoned for years. Probably in bad shape. Yeah, it's rough, I said. But the foundation looked solid. I heard it used to belong to a family named Ross. Linda's fork clattered onto her plate. Who told you that? Her voice came out sharp. I met her eyes, and for a split second, I saw something flicker behind them, fear. Just some old-timer in town, I said, dabbing my mouth with a napkin. Why, Mom? Do you know them? The color drained from Linda's face. She glanced at Frank, who was suddenly very interested in cutting his steak. Megan, oblivious, was still chattering with Andrew about Chicago. No, I don't know them, Linda said, forcing a brittle laugh. Old Mill Lane isn't really our neighborhood. Right, I said mildly, and went back to my mashed potatoes. I stayed until 8, helping Linda wash dishes and then building Lego towers with Noah and Liam. When I finally got up to leave, Linda followed me to the front door and grabbed my arm, harder than necessary. Ella, she said, her voice low. You haven't been talking to strangers, have you? Strangers. You know. People you don't know. Online. In town. Just, don't believe everything you hear. I gave her a neutral smile. Mom, I'm 28. I can tell the difference between truth and gossip. She loosened her grip, visibly relieved. Right. Well. Drive safe. I got in my car and watched the Mitchell house shrink in my rearview mirror. I went home and saved the audio from the recorder, clipping the part where Linda had said, "Don't believe everything you hear." It joined the rest of my growing folder. Deed and will scans. Photo of the 1978 IOU. Catherine's witness statement. Tonight's audio. One thing was still missing, my original adoption record. I called Catherine the next morning. To get my original birth certificate from the state, I need to file a formal request with the Minnesota Department of Health. It's a standard form, you're an adult, you have the right to see your own records. But Ella, she paused, once you file that, Linda and Frank will be notified. It's part of the process. I know, I said. I opened the state website, filled out the application, printed it, and signed it. Then I opened my notes app one more time and added a final line. When the time is right, I'll make them give back everything they stole. I looked out at the night sky over White Bear Lake. Spring was starting to show, a faint scent of something green and wet in the air. I thought about my grandmother's letter. I will always be watching. Grandma, I whispered into the darkness. I'm starting. The next few weeks were the busiest of my life. During the day, I worked my shifts. After work, I drove to Old Mill Lane. I found a local contractor named Gonzalez, a quiet Mexican-American man who walked through the house with his apprentice and gave me a list: new roof, new wiring, fix the leak in the attic, but the basement was solid. The bones are good, he said. About $20,000 to make it livable. If you want it pretty, more like 40. I did the math. With the inheritance from my grandmother, about $97,000 left after taxes, I could afford the fix-up and still have money left over. Do it, I said. Make it livable. Gonzalez nodded. His apprentice whistled. This place is gonna be gorgeous when it's done, lady. I stood in the front yard looking at the old elm tree, thicker than the oak at the Mitchell house, its canopy spreading wide. My tree. My house. My yard. Meanwhile, my record request was working its way through the bureaucracy. 2 weeks after I'd mailed it, I got a letter back from the state saying the request was being processed. We may need to contact your legal guardian for verification, the letter noted. I was 28. I didn't have a legal guardian. But the wording told me something important. Linda and Frank's names were still linked to my file in the system. 3 days later, my phone rang. Linda's name flashed on the screen. "Ella," she said, before I could even say hello. "Are you trying to access your birth records?" Her voice was sharp, too sharp, that brittle tone she used when she was covering something up. "Yeah," I said, keeping my voice casual. I was filling out a form and noticed my middle name was blank. Just curious if it was a clerical error. A 3-second silence. "You don't need to do that," Linda said, her pitch rising. "It's been blank forever. I never gave you a middle name. It's not a big deal. Why waste the money?" I listened to her flailing and felt a cold, familiar fire building in my chest. "Mom," I said carefully, "why does it bother you so much?" "I'm not bothered." She let out an unconvincing laugh. "It's just, you're making a fuss over nothing. 28 years, what's the point of digging up old forms? I need it for some applications. No big deal. It's just paperwork. Can't you cancel it?" "Already in the pipeline." Another long pause. Then her voice softened, a deliberate, practiced warmth. "Ella, honey, you've been working too hard. How about you come over this weekend? I'll make that cream of mushroom soup you used to like." I nearly laughed out loud. 28 years, and she'd never once made soup for me. Not once. Megan got soup when she came home. Set the chairs up in the backyard. "Busy this weekend," I said. "Maybe another time." I hung up and leaned back against the couch, exhaling. The fish was starting to bite. The next Saturday afternoon, Gonzalez called me. He was working on the roof at Old Mill Lane when a car pulled up, a middle-aged couple. They circled the house several times, peering through the windows. They asked who I was, Gonzalez said. I told them I was hired by the owner. They asked who the owner was. I said I didn't know. The woman's face went pale. Then they left. Tall blonde woman, maybe early 60s, and a heavy-set man in a baseball hat? I asked. Yeah. That's them. Linda and Frank. They'd found the house. I called Catherine. They went to Old Mill Lane. She wasn't surprised. They're panicking. You're getting close to the truth. What do I do next? Have Morrison send them an official letter. Certified mail. Let them know, formally, that you've inherited the house. That you know. I went to Morrison's office Monday morning and had him draft a simple notice, pursuant to Eleanor Ross's 1989 will. Ella Rose Mitchell had legally inherited 17 Old Mill Lane and associated assets. The letter was sent certified mail. 2 days later, it would land in Linda and Frank's mailbox. Those 2 days passed in quiet resolution. I went to work. I went to Old Mill Lane. I watched Gonzalez's crew patch the roof and rewire the outlets. I spent Saturday sanding and oiling the old oak furniture that had been sitting under sheets for decades. My hands blistered. I didn't care. Wednesday evening, my phone exploded. Linda had posted in the family group chat a long voice message that she'd apparently sent to everyone, all 20-plus members. Ella Mitchell. How could you go behind your parents' backs like this? That house was your grandmother's legacy, it belonged to all of us. And you've just taken it, all for yourself, without even telling us. Her voice cracked, a performance so practiced it sounded almost genuine. The group chat erupted. My cousin, wait, what's happening? My uncle, Linda, are you okay? Frank typed, Ella, we need to talk. Megan, Mom, what house? I stared at the screen, my pulse steady. Linda had made a tactical error. She'd played her hand in public, in front of everyone, casting herself as the victim. And now I could either let her control the narrative, or I could finally take it back. I typed one message into the chat: Mom, you said the house belonged to all of us. But Grandma died before I was born. How did you know about the will? Silence. For a full minute, no one typed. Then my uncle: Wait, what grandma? Ella's grandma died before she was born. I typed: my biological mother's mother. Eleanor Ross. The chat exploded. Cousin, biological mother? Uncle, Frank, what is she talking about? Aunt, Linda, is Ella adopted? My cousin again: Wait. So Linda isn't Ella's real mom. I watched the messages scroll, my heart hammering, but I held back. I didn't give them more. I'd planted the seed. Let Linda try to unplant it. I typed one last message: I just found out the truth myself. I'll talk to the people who need to talk to me privately. Sorry to cause a stir, everyone. Then I left the group chat. For the next half hour, my private messages flooded in. My cousin, Ella, seriously, what's going on? My uncle: does Frank know about this? Megan, Ella. Call me. Now. I didn't reply to any of them. I just waited. At 1 a.m., my phone rang. Frank. His voice was lower than I'd ever heard it, rough with exhaustion. Ella. Can you please not talk about this in the chat? Talk about what? I said. The fact that Linda isn't my biological mother? He was quiet for a long moment. I could hear him breathing. We were going to tell you, when you were older. I'm 28, Frank. How much older did you need me to get? 80? 100? It's complicated. There's a lot you don't know. Actually, I said, I know more than you think. I know about Eleanor's will. I know Linda promised to keep Rose as my middle name and then changed it. I know you borrowed $50,000 from my grandmother for the down payment on Maple Avenue and never paid it back. So please, explain to me what's so complicated that it justified hiding all of that. Something crashed in the background. A door slamming. Linda's voice, muffled but furious: How does she know all this? Who told her? Frank's voice was shaking now. Ella. Let's talk about this. Don't do anything rash. Please. $50,000, Frank. Stolen for 30 years. My name, stolen for 28. A house, hidden. For 30 years. I took a breath. You tell me I shouldn't be rash? What do you want? I shifted the phone to my other ear. My voice came out steady. First, Linda sends a public apology in the group chat for her voice message. None of that fake performance stuff. A real acknowledgement that she was wrong to spin it the way she did. Second, I want that loan repaid. $50,000 principal, 30 years of interest at standard mortgage rates. That comes to, let me calculate, $123,000. You have 1 month. Frank was silent. Third, you go to the county records office and file a correction to my birth certificate. A formal acknowledgement that it was erroneously omitted. You confirm my legal name is Ella Rose Mitchell. You do that, and I don't have to go through the official process that will give me exactly the same result, but with a hell of a lot more public records attached. Linda's voice screamed from somewhere behind Frank, this is insane. She can't do this. We raised her. I know you raised me. I said it quietly, not as an accusation, but as a fact. You gave me food, shelter, and education. I'm not denying that. But while you were raising me, you lied to me about who I was, stole my inheritance, and pretended $100,000 debt didn't exist. So I'm not asking for something I don't deserve. I'm asking for what was always mine. I gave them a month. By the next morning, Linda had posted a short text message in the group chat. I was emotional yesterday and said things I shouldn't have. Ella, I apologize. We're handling things privately. No substance. But the voice message was gone, replaced by this. I screenshotted it. Later that day, Frank texted, I'll get you the money. Send your account info. I sent it. By the end of the week, my bank account had a new deposit, $123,000. Frank Morrison called. Frank Mitchell had filed a formal correction at the records office, acknowledging the original birth certificate error and requesting the addition of Rose as my legal middle name. I sat in the break room at work staring at my phone, the weight in my chest lifting just a fraction. They were playing by my rules now. But I wasn't naive enough to think it was over. Linda Mitchell was not the kind of woman who walked away from a loss without one last swing. She was a master of two things: performing perfect domesticity, and manufacturing public opinion. Within a week, Megan posted on Instagram. An old photo, Linda and Frank holding a baby, probably me. The caption was a long, tear-jerking essay about what family means. I found this old picture in the album tonight. 28 years ago, my parents welcomed my baby sister into the world with so much love and hope. Some people think families are perfect, but we've had our share of differences. I'm still grateful for them every single day. Love you, at Ella Mitchell. The door is always open. The comment section flooded. So beautiful. Megan, you're such an amazing sister. Hope everything heals. Ella is so lucky to be in such a loving family. I read through dozens of comments, and I laughed. Lucky. They called me lucky. I'd had my name stolen. My inheritance hidden. My identity erased. And they called me lucky. I opened my notes app and typed, screenshot Megan's post. Document and store. Backup option active. Then I texted my cousin, who'd been DMing me with worried questions. Megan posted something. She read it. That's weird. What are you gonna do? Nothing, I said. Not yet. That's when I called Catherine. If you reply now, Catherine said, you play right into their hands. Megan wants a public response, a fight. If you ignore it, people start to wonder. Why hasn't Ella responded to her sister's heartfelt post? And then you take control. You let the silence do the work. After a few days, when people start asking you directly, you tell a little more. Not all at once. Pieces. Let people feel like they're discovering the truth themselves. I put the phone down and set a timer on my phone. 3 days. I turned off notifications and spent the weekend scraping wallpaper at Old Mill Lane. When I finally opened my phone again, the post's heat had faded, down to about 400 comments, none of them new. But my private messages had multiplied. Cousin. Uncle. Old high school friend I hadn't spoken to in years. Ella, are you okay? Saw Megan's post, got worried. I didn't send a manifesto. I sent each person who asked the same brief message, I'm okay. If you really want to know the full story, you can read this. But please, keep it to yourself. The link was to a private Google Doc I'd prepared. No details I wasn't ready to share publicly, but enough: the adoption, the name change, the will, the legal notices. Within a day, my cousin texted me back, "Oh my God, Ella. So you're really not?" "Yeah," I said. "I found out 2 months ago." "That's insane. Those people." "It's handled." My cousin went quiet. "Then, you handled it, though. You actually handled it." The public momentum was shifting. A few of Meghan's followers started posting cryptic comments beneath her original post. Things like, "Wait, I heard something else." And, "So that's why she hasn't replied." Then Linda called. "I know about the document," she said, her voice trembling with fury, "but for the first time, underneath it, I heard something else. Fear." "Good," I said. "What do you want from us, Ella?" Her voice broke. "You've got the money. You've got the house. You've got the name back. What else are you going to take from me?" "I don't want to take anything from you, Linda," I said. "I just want you to stop pretending. Stop playing the perfect family card. Stop using Meghan as your mouthpiece." "And if I don't?" I leaned back in my chair and looked out the window at my elm tree. "I have all the evidence. The letter, the will, the loan, Catherine's testimony. The folders packed and ready. If you or Meghan ever make another public play like that Instagram post, or if anyone in this family ever hears a false story about what happened, I will release it. Every last detail." Linda was crying now, ugly jagged gasps. "You'd destroy your own family?" "Linda," I said quietly, "it wasn't ever a family. You didn't build one. You built a stage." I hung up. And for the first time in 28 years, I felt the ghost of that hollow space in my chest, the one that had always been asking "Where do I belong?" begin to close. The next few months settled into a new rhythm. Old Mill Lane was finished by midsummer. When Gonzalez hammered in the last strip of baseboard, he stood at the front door, wiped his hands on his jeans, and grinned. "It's ready, lady." I walked through the house. The walls were warm oatmeal. The oak furniture gleamed. The kitchen was a tiny galley with a new stove and a shallow sink, exactly my height. In the bedroom, I'd laid down a blue floral rug I'd found at a salvage shop, and on the nightstand, I'd placed Eleanor's photograph, the one from the old picture, her sitting in a wicker chair on the back porch, sun-spotted and smiling. Next to her photograph, I put a small vase of fresh white daisies. I changed them every week. "Perfect," I told Gonzalez. He nodded and left with his apprentice. That first night, I sat on the couch, another salvage find, its springs giving a soft protest when I sank into it, and watched the evening light filter through the big elm tree in the front yard. A bird landed on the fence, tilted its head at me, then flew off. I thought about how many times I'd moved as a kid. From the nursery to the bigger room, from the bigger room to the basement apartment. Every time, Linda would stand with her hands on her hips and say, "How do you have so much stuff?" And then she'd cram it all into boxes labeled Ella's things in black marker. No one had ever said to me, "Ella, this is your home." Now someone had. Even if that someone was herself. The house started to feel like it was becoming mine. I'd sit on the front porch in the evenings with a book and iced tea, watching the sun go down. On weekends, I'd invite Catherine over for simple dinners, spaghetti with tomatoes from the little garden I'd planted along the fence. She told me stories about Margaret, how she'd loved wearing blue sweaters, how she'd been a studious but quiet kid, how she'd never talked about the baby's father. "Your mother was stubborn," Catherine said one evening, pushing a strand of my hair out of my face with the same maternal gesture I'd seen her use on her own grandchildren. She just said, "He's not in my life, and that's all you need to know." Did she ever seem sad about it? Catherine thought for a moment. She was scared. 22 years old, having a baby alone in a hospital. But she held you and smiled like nothing else mattered. I touched my own face, the small dimple at the corner of my mouth. You said she had this. You have it too. It's Margaret's dimple. I started to cry, but it wasn't a sad cry. It was more like a relief, like finally finding a door you'd been looking for your whole life. One afternoon, I ran into Megan at the grocery store. White Bear Lake is a small town, the Walmart is the only one in town. I was in the produce aisle picking out tomatoes when I looked up and saw her at the other end, ponytail, yoga pants, a bag of organic apples in her hand. We locked eyes for a long second. Her expression was complicated, like she wasn't sure if she should smile or run. She walked toward me, stiff-legged. Ella. Megan. I put a tomato in my cart. You moved, I heard. Yeah. To Old Mill Lane. Yep. A silence stretched between us. A kid ran past, his mother yelling after him. Then Megan lowered her voice. Ella, Mom's been struggling. She's not sleeping. Can't you just? No. She blinked, taken aback. Her insomnia isn't my problem, I said. She made choices. She's living with them. And Megan, your post on Instagram. You never asked me what happened. You just put up a picture and a caption that made everything look fine. Megan flushed. I didn't know the whole story. Mom said you guys had a disagreement over a house. You're 32 years old. You have 2 kids. I met her eyes. Do you really think that's all there is to it? She went pale. Her mouth opened, but nothing came out. I'm not mad at you, I said. But I need you to think about what you're posting next time. Those family first captions, they have weight. I pushed my cart past her. Halfway down the aisle, I glanced back. She was still standing there, staring at her apples. That night, my phone buzzed. Megan, in my DMs. Ella. I talked to Mom tonight. She told me, some of it. Not all, I think. But enough to know I should have asked you first. I'm sorry for the post. I really didn't know. The link was to a private Google Doc I'd prepared. No details I wasn't ready to share publicly, but enough: the adoption, the name change, the will, the legal notices. Within a day, my cousin texted me back, "Oh my God, Ella. So you're really not?" "Yeah," I said. "I found out 2 months ago." "That's insane. Those people." "It's handled." My cousin went quiet. "Then, you handled it, though. You actually handled it." The public momentum was shifting. A few of Megan's followers started posting cryptic comments beneath her original post. Things like, "Wait, I heard something else." And, "So that's why she hasn't replied." Then Linda called. "I know about the document," she said, her voice trembling with fury, "but for the first time, underneath it, I heard something else. Fear." "Good," I said. "What do you want from us, Ella?" Her voice broke. "You've got the money. You've got the house. You've got the name back. What else are you going to take from me?" "I don't want to take anything from you, Linda," I said. "I just want you to stop pretending. Stop playing the perfect family card. Stop using Megan as your mouthpiece." "And if I don't?" I leaned back in my chair and looked out the window at my elm tree. I have all the evidence. The letter, the will, the loan, Catherine's testimony. The folders packed and ready. If you or Megan ever make another public play like that Instagram post, or if anyone in this family ever hears a false story about what happened, I will release it. Every last detail. Linda was crying now, ugly jagged gasps. You'd destroy your own family? Linda, I said quietly, it wasn't ever a family. You didn't build one. You built a stage. I hung up. And for the first time in 28 years, I felt the ghost of that hollow space in my chest, the one that had always been asking where do I belong, begin to close. The next few months settled into a new rhythm. Old Mill Lane was finished by midsummer. When Gonzalez hammered in the last strip of baseboard, he stood at the front door, wiped his hands on his jeans, and grinned. It's ready, lady. I walked through the house. The walls were warm oatmeal. The oak furniture gleamed. The kitchen was a tiny galley with a new stove and a shallow sink, exactly my height. In the bedroom, I'd laid down a blue floral rug I'd found at a salvage shop, and on the nightstand, I'd placed Eleanor's photograph, the one from the old picture, her sitting in a wicker chair on the back porch, sun-spotted and smiling. Next to her photograph, I put a small vase of fresh white daisies. I changed them every week. Perfect, I told Gonzalez. He nodded and left with his apprentice. That first night, I sat on the couch, another salvage find, its springs giving a soft protest when I sank into it, and watched the evening light filter through the big elm tree in the front yard. A bird landed on the fence, tilted its head at me, then flew off. I thought about how many times I'd moved as a kid. From the nursery to the bigger room, from the bigger room to the basement apartment. Every time, Linda would stand with her hands on her hips and say, "How do you have so much stuff?" And then she'd cram it all into boxes labeled Ella's things in black marker. No one had ever said to me, "Ella, this is your home." Now someone had. Even if that someone was herself. The house started to feel like it was becoming mine. I'd sit on the front porch in the evenings with a book and iced tea, watching the sun go down. On weekends, I'd invite Catherine over for simple dinners, spaghetti with tomatoes from the little garden I'd planted along the fence. She told me stories about Margaret, how she'd loved wearing blue sweaters, how she'd been a studious but quiet kid, how she'd never talked about the baby's father. "Your mother was stubborn," Catherine said one evening, pushing a strand of my hair out of my face with the same maternal gesture I'd seen her use on her own grandchildren. She just said, "He's not in my life, and that's all you need to know." Did she ever seem sad about it? Catherine thought for a moment. She was scared. 22 years old, having a baby alone in a hospital. But she held you and smiled like nothing else mattered. I touched my own face, the small dimple at the corner of my mouth. "You said she had this. You have it too." "It's Margaret's dimple." I started to cry, but it wasn't a sad cry. It was more like a relief, like finally finding a door you'd been looking for your whole life. One afternoon, I ran into Megan at the grocery store. White Bear Lake is a small town, the Walmart is the only one in town. I was in the produce aisle picking out tomatoes when I looked up and saw her at the other end, ponytail, yoga pants, a bag of organic apples in her hand. We locked eyes for a long second. Her expression was complicated, like she wasn't sure if she should smile or run. She walked toward me, stiff-legged. "Ella." "Megan." I put a tomato in my cart. "You moved," I heard. "Yeah." "To Old Mill Lane." "Yep." A silence stretched between us. A kid ran past, his mother yelling after him. Then Megan lowered her voice. Ella, Mom's been struggling. She's not sleeping. Can't you just? No. She blinked, taken aback. Her insomnia isn't my problem, I said. She made choices. She's living with them. And Megan, your post on Instagram. You never asked me what happened. You just put up a picture and a caption that made everything look fine. Megan flushed. I didn't know the whole story. Mom said you guys had a disagreement over a house. You're 32 years old. You have 2 kids. I met her eyes. Do you really think that's all there is to it? She went pale. Her mouth opened, but nothing came out. I'm not mad at you, I said. But I need you to think about what you're posting next time. Those family first captions, they have weight. I pushed my cart past her. Halfway down the aisle, I glanced back. She was still standing there, staring at her apples. That night, my phone buzzed. Megan, in my DMs. Ella. I talked to Mom tonight. She told me, some of it. Not all, I think. But enough to know I should have asked you first. I'm sorry for the post. I really didn't know. I read it twice. Then I replied, received. 2 words. Not forgiveness. Not anger. Just acknowledgement. When I told Catherine about it, she laughed. Your sister has more sense than your mother ever did. Maybe. But I'm not expecting her to take my side. If she just stays neutral, I'll count that as progress. By late summer, I was starting to feel like a person who had a place in the world. People in the neighborhood, mostly older couples who'd lived there for decades, started to recognize me. You're Eleanor's granddaughter, a white-haired woman said one afternoon when I was weeding the front garden. You have her chin. I smiled. Thank you. You look a lot like your mother, too, she said. Margaret used to sit on that porch and read. Same spot. I realized, slowly, that I didn't introduce myself as a Mitchell anymore. When someone asked who I was, I'd say, Ella Ross. Sometimes I'd add, I live at 17 Old Mill Lane. It felt good to say it, like fitting a key into a lock. One evening in late August, I set up the tripod in my front yard, the same old metal tripod Frank had used for all those Mitchell family photos. I'd retrieved it from the garage at Maple Avenue months ago. I don't think anyone missed it. I set the self-timer and walked over to stand under the elm tree. I wore a blue floral dress I'd bought at a second-hand shop, the same shade as the one Margaret wore in the old photo. The timer counted down from 10. I thought about all those photographs I'd been half-cropped out of. The green sleeve. The missing face. Every Easter, every Christmas, every time Linda had said, stand in the middle next time, and never made space. 3, 2, 1. Click. I walked over and looked at the preview. Sunlight was filtering through the elm leaves, speckling the grass and my blue dress. My face was centered in the frame. The small dimple in my cheek was visible, lit just right. I looked at that photo for a long time. Then I made it my phone wallpaper. That night, I lay in bed and listened to the elm leaves rustling outside my window. And I realized, I wasn't a guest anymore. I wasn't someone else's afterthought. I came from Margaret Ross, a 22-year-old who'd held me in a hospital room and smiled. I came from Eleanor Ross, who'd hidden a deed and a key and a letter for me because she'd known, somehow, that one day I'd need them. I turned off the lamp and whispered into the dark, Margaret. Grandma. I fixed the house. I'm okay. The wind picked up, and the leaves rustled louder, like an answer. Winter came, as it always does in Minnesota. I sat by the window in Old Mill Lane, a cup of tea warming my hands, watching the snow pile up on the fence and the bare branches of the elm. The fireplace was crackling behind me, casting flickering shadows across the floor. The months since had been quiet. I still worked at the hospice. Betty had passed in the fall, her daughter crying on my shoulder and thanking me, but the work didn't feel like a burden anymore. It just felt like what I did. I saw Linda once, in the grocery store. She looked at me, then looked away, steering her cart down another aisle as if we were strangers. Frank and I exchanged a single nod in the post office once. He looked like he was about to say something, but he thought better of it. Megan still sent me a message now and then. Holiday greetings, mostly. I never replied, but I never blocked her either. She existed, at the edges, like a closed drawer. One weekend, while sorting through Eleanor's old trunk, I found something I'd missed, a yellowed newspaper clipping from 1988, folded into an envelope I'd somehow overlooked before. A short piece from the local paper, Margaret Ross, 22, passes after childbirth. The article was brief, barely 2 paragraphs, ending with, "The infant daughter has been placed with a local family." I framed it and put it on the nightstand beside Eleanor's photograph. 2 women, 1 birth, 1 death, both of them part of my life now. Catherine came over for New Year's. She pointed at the clipping and the photo side by side. "You put them together?" "Yeah," I said. "Good." Her voice was rough. "Eleanor would be proud." "Thank you. For everything." She nodded, and for a moment I thought she was going to cry, but she just squeezed my hand and walked into the kitchen to help me with the potatoes. On New Year's Eve, I stood on the front porch in my coat, watching the fireworks explode over White Bear Lake. The night was cold, crisp, the sky dark and clear. Every flash of color lit up the snow, turning it into a glittering canvas. I pulled out my phone and took a selfie, nose red, breath fogging the air, the fireworks behind me. I posted it on Instagram, captionless, with one hashtag, #EllaRossWinter. The first like came from Catherine O'Brien. The second came from a memorial account I'd created for Eleanor Ross, nothing much, just 2 old photos of the house. On New Year's Eve, seeing those 2 names together on my screen, a living friend and someone I'd never met but carried inside me, felt like enough. People sometimes ask me what happened next. Did you cut ties completely? Did Linda ever come after you again? What about Megan's post? I tell them, Linda never bothered me again. She'd learned what kind of cards I was holding. She still lived in White Bear Lake, still did her community appearances, but according to my cousin, she'd stopped talking about our perfect family in quite the same way. Megan eventually took down the Easter photo and the Instagram post. She never made a public statement, but she did send me one long private message. She'd gone through some of Linda's old boxes and found documents she'd never known existed. She said she needed time. I didn't ask her to explain. Frank sent me a check for $50 on my birthday, with a note, "Happy birthday. Hope you're well." I put it in a drawer and never cashed it. The elm tree at Old Mill Lane grew another ring that spring, greener and fuller than the year before. Gonzalez's apprentice hung a tire swing from one of the branches. Some afternoons, when I got off work early, I'd sit in it and watch the sun go down. And my own photograph, the one I'd taken under the tree, is framed and hanging in the living room. Where am I in the picture? I'm right in the middle. Sunlight on my face, the dimple on my right cheek visible, clear as anything. There's no one else in the frame. But I don't feel alone. Because I know what my name is. Ella Rose Mitchell. Rose is in the middle, because someone placed it there before I could even open my eyes, and someone else tried to take it away. But now, it's back. And I'm never letting go of it again.